I don't know how crazy they are. So I'm going to ask you to stop talking about them right now. They're like an inch away from the bomb, you know?
Mel Brooks is Hollywood royalty, a comedic genius who turned chaos into pure laughter. But behind the jokes and iconic films, even Brooks faced his fair share of headaches. Specifically, 6 legendary actors of Golden Age Hollywood who tested his patience like no one else. From diva demands to serious-faced stars who just didn't get his humor, Brooks's candid, sometimes hilarious reflections reveal the human side of the stars we idolize. Let's dive into the personalities that kept him on his toes. Gene Hackman, the serious one who wouldn't laugh. If there's one thing Mel Brooks learned early in his career, it's that not all stars speak the same comedic language. Enter Gene Hackman, the man Brooks famously admitted just wasn't funny in his eyes. Now, let's be clear. Hackman is a Hollywood legend, with an Oscar collection that could intimidate a small nation. But for Brooks, whose world thrives on absurdity, slapstick, and a little irreverence, Hackman's straight-faced intensity sometimes felt like trying to juggle flaming swords while someone else yells, "Fire!" Brooks first encountered Hackman during casting considerations for one of his projects in the 70s. He remembered thinking, here's a great actor, talented, serious, but can he handle a little chaos? Apparently, chaos was not Hackman's forte. Brooks often joked in interviews about Hackman's poker face, describing it as the kind of seriousness that could stop a clock and certainly stop a director from laughing. In other words, the man could deliver a scene so convincingly straight that the room's only laughter would come from Brooks's crew trying to hide their own giggles. The tension wasn't malicious, it was more a collision of worlds. Hackman, trained in drama and deeply committed to authenticity, approached acting like a craftsman. Precision, focus, depth. Brooks, on the other hand, thrived on improvisation, on bending reality until it snapped in a funny, unpredictable way. When these two collided, the sparks weren't dangerous. They were hilarious, at least in hindsight. Brooks recounted a scene where Hackman was supposed to react to an absurd pratfall. Hackman delivered his lines perfectly, utterly straight, leaving Brooks almost in tears from frustration and laughter. What made Hackman particularly challenging wasn't stubbornness. It was a kind of disciplined seriousness that Brooks found both admirable and exasperating. In interviews, Brooks laughed about how he tried, in vain, to coax Hackman into the comedic fold. He tried jokes, slapstick, even some of his patented over-the-top antics. Hackman remained resolutely Hackman. Impeccable delivery, zero winks, zero giggles. It was like trying to tickle a statue, Brooks said, grinning at the memory. Yet, even in that frustration, there's admiration. Brooks never denied Hackman's brilliance. In fact, he frequently emphasized that working with someone so intensely committed raised the bar for everyone on set. It was just exhausting for someone who lived in a world of exaggerated eyebrows, pratfalls, and pun-laden chaos. It's easy to imagine Brooks shaking his head during a rehearsal, muttering, "This guy is a genius, but I'm losing my mind." Hackman's problem, if you want to call it that, was a classic clash of temperament. The comedic director who wanted wild energy versus the actor who built worlds with subtle gestures and silence. For Brooks, the experience became a source of stories he would happily recount for decades, the kind that make interviews entertaining, and scoops like this one irresistible. There's almost a cosmic symmetry to it. The man who could bend audiences to tears with subtlety versus the man who wanted audiences doubled over in laughter. By the end of the project, Brooks admitted that while Hackman never became his comedic sidekick, he gained a deep respect for the actor's commitment and skill. And Hackman? Well, he probably went home, unaware that a legendary comedy director had spent days trying to make him laugh and failing spectacularly. The collision of seriousness and absurdity became, in retrospect, a defining anecdote of Brooks's career. Proof that even the most challenging co-stars can leave a lasting mark. Hackman may not have been funny in Brooks's eyes, but he was unforgettable. And sometimes, that's just what Hollywood needs. A straight-faced counterpoint to pure, chaotic comedy. So, if Hackman taught Brooks one thing, it's that patience and a sense of humor about your own frustration are essential when working with the masters. But who would be next on Brooks' list of challenges? Let's turn to a cowboy who made a few of Brooks' plans a little trickier. John Wayne, the Duke who played it straight. John Wayne. The very name evokes wide-open plains, dusty hats, and a commanding presence that defined American cinema. To Mel Brooks, though, Wayne was less a symbol of heroism and more a hilarious challenge. How do you convince the toughest cowboy in Hollywood to step into a world of irreverent comedy? Brooks, ever the trickster of the studio lot, wanted Wayne for Blazing Saddles, imagining the legendary Duke delivering lines with his iconic gravitas. In Brooks's mind, the juxtaposition of Wayne's stoicism against the film's absurdity would have created pure cinematic lightning. Unfortunately, or hilariously, Wayne had other plans. Brooks recounted that his first thought was simple. If anyone can sell absurdity while looking completely serious, it's John Wayne. He envisioned a scene where chaos erupted around Wayne, outlaws flying, townspeople screaming, yet he would stand there, jaw set, eyes unwavering, and deliver a line like, "We ride at dawn." The comedy, Brooks knew, comes not from exaggeration, but from sheer straight-faced delivery amid utter lunacy. It was a director's dream, at least on paper. But when Brooks approached Wayne, the results were less ideal than imagined. Wayne reportedly politely declined. Brooks, amused and slightly frustrated, took it in stride. He often joked about the encounter in interviews. "I tried to get him to do it. I even pitched it as a sort of epic western, but with more fart jokes." The contrast between Brooks's irreverent vision and Wayne's heroic image made the situation almost comical. Here was a man whose screen persona was built on unwavering courage and dignity, now being asked to appear in a world where horses talked, towns went up in smoke for laughs, and the sheriff's office was run by a man in a feathered hat. Wayne's straight-laced, larger-than-life hero simply didn't fit Brooks' zany puzzle. It wasn't hostility, it was a clash of cinematic worlds. Brooks loved Wayne and admired the legend he'd become. But there's something inherently funny about trying to fit a classical Western icon into a wildly absurdist comedy. Brooks frequently used the anecdote to illustrate how Hollywood can be both collaborative and hilarious when personalities collide. The Duke versus Brooks story became a favorite among journalists and talk show hosts, highlighting Brooks's ability to poke fun at himself and the industry at large. Even in Rejection, there was comedy. Brooks also reflected on what Wayne's presence might have done for the film. Imagine the town of Rock Ridge, a riotous mess of racially charged satire and slapstick chaos, with Wayne's stoic figure at its center. "It would have been the perfect straight man," Brooks said, "and I would have spent every take trying not to laugh at his seriousness." In Brooks's world, the straight man is the ultimate comedic foil, and Wayne fit that mold, even if only in the director's imagination. The missed opportunity became part of Brooks's lore of what could have been that entertained him for decades. Yet, Wayne wasn't the only big name Brooks had to charm or fail to charm into his chaotic universe. The experience taught him lessons about Hollywood diplomacy, timing, and the art of pitching absurd ideas to legends. Brooks learned that some stars' personas are so strong that bending them for comedy is like trying to turn a battleship with a bicycle. Still, the story is told with warmth, never malice, showing Brooks' fondness for Wayne's mythic presence. Even though Wayne didn't step into Rock Ridge, he became part of the film's backstage mythology, a symbol of the larger-than-life stars Brooks both revered and playfully teased. Brooks's anecdotes about Wayne underline a broader truth. Working with legends can be hilarious precisely because of their immovable personas. It's the collision of the impossible with the absurd that creates stories people remember. Brooks loved telling these tales, and Wayne's refusal became one of his favorites. There's comedy and respect in trying and failing to coax a hero into slapstick chaos, and Brooks never missed a chance to highlight it. While John Wayne never donned a feathered hat or delivered a joke about a farting horse, his presence lingers in the lore of Blazing Saddles. Brooks's tale captures the charm of Hollywood's golden age, larger-than-life personalities, creative ambition, and, of course, endless opportunities for stories that get funnier with time. Moving on, we see yet another force of nature who could test even Brooks' boundless patience and wit. Katherine Hepburn, the indomitable force of nature. Katherine Hepburn. Just saying her name conjures images of elegance, wit, and an iron will wrapped in charm. To Mel Brooks, working with someone like Hepburn was both thrilling and terrifying, a mix of inspiration and exasperation. Hepburn wasn't difficult for the sake of being difficult. She simply knew her mind, her craft, and exactly how she wanted to present herself. For a director like Brooks, whose comedy thrives on chaos and unpredictability, that combination could be equal parts awe-inspiring and headache-inducing. Brooks first crossed paths with Hepburn indirectly during casting discussions for one of his 70s projects. He often recounted with a grin that directing Hepburn would require the patience of a saint, the tact of a diplomat, and a willingness to embrace the occasional quip with humility. Hepburn's reputation for control over her roles wasn't exaggerated. She had a remarkable ability to dominate a scene with just a glance, a pause, or the slightest shift of posture, leaving everyone else scrambling to keep up. For Brooks, whose humor is often loud, exaggerated, and slapstick-heavy, balancing her composure with his chaos was an almost absurdist exercise in contrast. In interviews, Brooks joked about the challenge of coaxing a laugh from Hepburn. "She's not someone you tickle with a joke," he said. "She laughs when she wants to, and that's that." This made for some funny behind-the-scenes anecdotes. For instance, Brooks imagined a scene in which his zany actors flail and tumble around, while Hepburn, impeccably poised, delivers a line with her classic sharpness. The juxtaposition of absolute sophistication against utter absurdity was exactly the kind of tension Brooks adored, even if it left him momentarily frazzled during rehearsals. Hepburn's strength wasn't just in her craft, but in her personality. She had opinions, insisted on doing things her way, and demanded respect, a combination that could intimidate less confident directors. Brooks, ever the quick-witted storyteller, often described these interactions with humor rather than frustration, marveling at how a single glance from Hepburn could stop a scene dead in its tracks. He admired her professionalism and precision, but the challenge was how to make someone so formidable fit into a comedy that celebrated the ridiculous and chaotic. There were also lighter moments, as Brooks liked to recall. He often joked about imagining Hepburn reacting to some of his more outrageous ideas. Would she raise an eyebrow in disdain, deliver a scathing line with perfect timing, or simply walk out, leaving the crew scrambling? The fun, Brooks said, was in the mental exercise of imagining such reactions, knowing full well that Hepburn would do it flawlessly if she chose to. The humor was in respect, in acknowledging a personality so commanding that even the most absurd comedy had to bend around it. Brooks' stories about Hepburn highlight a broader theme. The interplay of strong personalities and comedy is delicate and infinitely entertaining. Hepburn's confidence and control contrasted beautifully with Brooks's impulsive, energetic style. He respected her, feared her slightly, and loved her for the challenge. It's the perfect storm of admiration, frustration, and comedic storytelling that defines Brooks' reflections on his encounters with Hollywood legends. Ultimately, Hepburn represented the kind of challenge Brooks relished. She was smart, formidable, and perfectly aware of her power, making her a co-star any director would both dread and crave. The stories he told about her were never mean-spirited. Instead, they celebrated her brilliance while illustrating the careful dance required to navigate genius personalities in a comedic setting. Hepburn's presence was a reminder that Golden Age stars were larger than life, and that working with them demanded equal parts respect, creativity, and humor. While Brooks never directed Hepburn directly in a major film, the thought of doing so provided endless material for stories and imagination. She embodied the kind of star who could both elevate a scene and test a director's patience to the limit. And with Hepburn out of the way in theory, Brooks's next challenge brought him face-to-face with a different kind of intensity, a legend whose very presence could command a room. Bette Davis, the intensity personified. Bette Davis. If Katherine Hepburn was the indomitable force of elegance and wit, Davis was pure, unfiltered intensity. To Mel Brooks, working with someone like her, at least in theory, was a thrilling mix of admiration, fear, and fascination. Davis had a presence that could fill a soundstage without moving a muscle. Her eyes alone could communicate menace, humor, or disdain. Brooks, whose comedic instincts thrived on exaggeration, slapstick, and chaos, often joked that Davis's intensity made even the wildest antics look tame or terrifying by comparison. Brooks' stories about Davis are a mix of direct experience and imaginative anecdotes, the kind that make Hollywood legends so endlessly entertaining. He often recounted the idea of trying to direct a scene with Davis, the cast running in comedic panic, props flying everywhere, and Davis standing deadpan at the center, delivering lines with razor-sharp precision. In Brooks's eyes, the contrast between her fierce professionalism and the absurdity swirling around her created comedy all on its own. "You don't have to make her funny," Brooks quipped. "She's funny just by being herself." Bette Davis was famously intense, and Brooks's reflections highlighted the challenge this posed to directors who thrived on spontaneous humor. She didn't laugh on cue. She didn't improvise just to accommodate a director's whim. Instead, she brought a level of commitment that was both inspiring and exhausting. For Brooks, whose world depended on bending reality until it snapped in laughter, Davis's very seriousness became a comedic foil. Her mere presence could elevate a slapstick scene or stop it cold, an effect Brooks found simultaneously frustrating and brilliant. Davis's professionalism also came with demands. Brooks liked to joke about her legendary diva moments, imagining the exaggerated directions and dramatic sighs she could unleash during rehearsals. While he never worked extensively with her, Brooks appreciated the lessons her persona taught. Working with extraordinary talent requires flexibility, respect, and a thick skin. Davis's intensity forced anyone nearby to raise their game, whether in comedic timing, set design, or sheer patience. In Brooks's telling, it was like juggling dynamite while walking a tightrope, terrifying, exhilarating, and unforgettable. One anecdote Brooks loved to tell involved imagining Davis reacting to his most absurd ideas. Picture a room of chaos. Actors tumbling, props flying, a ridiculous musical number in full swing. Then Davis, with a single raised eyebrow, could reduce the entire scene to silence, or, if she chose, deliver the punchline with devastating accuracy. The humor, Brooks explained, came not from mockery, but from the inherent contrast between her commanding presence and the pandemonium around her. Davis didn't have to try to be funny. The comedy emerged from her very gravitas. Brooks's reflections also emphasize admiration. While Davis's intensity could challenge even the most patient director, it also inspired greatness. She demanded excellence, and in doing so forced those around her, including Brooks' hypothetical scenarios, to elevate their work. For a man who thrived on bending reality for comedic effect, Davis represented the ultimate challenge. Someone so powerful that her seriousness became a lens through which absurdity could shine even brighter. Ultimately, Bette Davis symbolizes the kind of Hollywood personality that made Mel Brooks' career both challenging and endlessly entertaining. She wasn't difficult for drama's sake. She was brilliant, committed, and unforgettable. For Brooks, she was a perfect example of how strong personalities can create tension, admiration, and humor all at once. The stories about Davis are less about frustration and more about celebrating a co-star whose very presence could transform a scene, sometimes terrifyingly, sometimes hilariously. And so, after the intensity of Davis, Brooks's next challenge required navigating glamour, mystique, and diva energy of a very different kind. Enter someone whose elegance and legendary persona brought a new set of comedic puzzles to the director's imagination. Marlene Dietrich, the glamorous enigma. Marlene Dietrich. The name alone evokes shimmering gowns, smoky voices, and a presence that could silence a room. To Mel Brooks, she was both a dream and a challenge, the ultimate glamorous enigma of Golden Age Hollywood. Dietrich was legendary for her poise, her diva reputation, and her knack for turning even the simplest gesture into a statement. For Brooks, whose world thrived on absurdity, pratfalls, and over-the-top antics, working with someone like Dietrich was the cinematic equivalent of balancing a champagne glass on a unicycle while riding through a hurricane. Brooks often reflected on Dietrich with a mix of awe and humor. He never actually directed her in a film, but imagining doing so provided endless entertainment. In interviews, he described the challenge of integrating her legendary elegance into a chaotic, comedic scene. Picture a zany musical number with props flying and actors tumbling, then Dietrich standing perfectly composed, delivering her line with icy precision. She didn't have to try to be glamorous, Brooks would joke. She just was. And that made everything else look ridiculous in comparison. Dietrich's reputation for diva-like behavior was well-earned, though Brooks approached it with a light touch. He often joked about her meticulous demands, imagining her perfecting every detail of a costume or insisting on precise lighting before a single take. For a director accustomed to embracing chaos, these demands were simultaneously frustrating and hilarious. Brooks, ever the improviser, loved imagining ways to incorporate Dietrich's elegance into comedic scenarios, often picturing the comedic tension of her straight-laced presence amidst slapstick lunacy. One of Brooks's favorite anecdotes was about imagining a scene where Dietrich's icy persona clashed with Brooks's typical absurdity. He pictured her reacting to a ridiculous mishap, perhaps a prop piano falling or an actor tripping across the set, with a single raised eyebrow. That look alone, Brooks quipped, could ruin a perfectly timed joke or elevate it to brilliance. The comedy, he explained, didn't come from mocking Dietrich. It came from the stark contrast between her composure and the chaos surrounding her. Her very presence became part of the humor. Brooks also highlighted Dietrich's intelligence and sharp wit. She wasn't just a glamorous figure, she was clever, politically savvy, and fully aware of her power as an icon. Any director hoping to harness her charisma had to respect her mind as much as her image. Brooks delighted in imagining the mental dance required to direct her, how to align her legendary persona with the slapstick energy he loved. The challenge, he said with a grin, was keeping her dignified while letting the comedy run wild around her. Dietrich's combination of elegance, diva energy, and commanding presence made her a fascinating subject for Brooks' reflections on Hollywood. She embodied the glamour of the golden age while also representing the unpredictability of working with legendary talent. For Brooks, this mix provided endless amusement and storytelling fodder. Even hypothetically, directing Dietrich required creativity, diplomacy, and a sense of humor, qualities Brooks relished exercising. Ultimately, Marlene Dietrich represented a co-star who could inspire, intimidate, and amuse simultaneously. Brooks's tales about her celebrate both her brilliance and the fun of imagining the impossible, melding classic Hollywood elegance with the chaotic energy of slapstick comedy. Dietrich, in Brooks's imagination, was a perfect example of how larger-than-life personalities could challenge a director, enrich the filmmaking process, and create stories that last for decades. After the glamour and mystique of Dietrich, Brooks's next challenge brought him face-to-face with perfection itself. The obstacles shifted from diva elegance to meticulous precision, offering a new set of humorous and frustrating lessons for any director attempting to orchestrate comedy with a dancing legend. Fred Astaire, the perfectionist maestro. Fred Astaire. The name evokes elegance, rhythm, and a seemingly effortless grace that transformed dance into poetry. For Mel Brooks, imagining a collaboration with Astaire was both thrilling and intimidating. Astaire wasn't just an actor. He was a force of nature on screen, with precision, timing, and control that left even the most seasoned directors in awe. Brooks, whose humor thrives on chaos, pratfalls, and exaggerated antics, knew that working with Astaire would require a delicate balance, respecting perfection while injecting comedy. Brooks often recounted imagining Astaire on set, every movement flawless, every gesture exact, while actors tumbled, props flew, and absurdity ruled the scene. The challenge, Brooks said with a laugh, was trying to make a man who dances like an angel survive a world that's gone completely bonkers. Astaire's commitment to precision could both inspire and frustrate. While his skill was undeniable, Brooks loved imagining the tiny sparks of tension that arose when spontaneity met meticulous choreography. It was comedy in contrast, absurdity in juxtaposition. Astaire's perfectionism extended beyond dance. He expected excellence in lighting, camera angles, timing, and even co-stars' reactions. Brooks, a director who thrived on improvisation and the unexpected, often joked about how this made for amusing clashes of style. Picture Brooks suggesting a wild gag while Astaire adjusted his sleeve, measured his step, and maintained perfect posture. The resulting tension, Brooks explained, would be fertile ground for comedic storytelling, even if only in the imagination. One of Brooks's favorite stories involved envisioning a scene in which Astaire's precise tap routine was interrupted by slapstick chaos. An actor trips, a prop piano tips, and a whirlwind of absurdity surrounds him. According to Brooks, the humor emerges from Astaire's ability to remain perfectly composed while pandemonium erupts around him. It's the ultimate straight man scenario. His perfection contrasts with chaos so sharply that the audience laughs at the absurdity without him ever trying. For Brooks, this was comedic gold. Astaire's influence on Brooks extended beyond hypothetical scenarios. His meticulous approach taught the value of preparation and discipline, even when dealing with the most outrageous comedy. Brooks often reflected on how directing, like dancing, requires timing, rhythm, and an understanding of when to let chaos in and when to maintain control. Astaire, as a symbol of perfection, offered a lens through which Brooks could appreciate the craft behind brilliance, even in the realm of absurdity. Despite the challenges, Brooks's stories about Astaire are affectionate, rather than critical. He respected the legend's talent and dedication, even while imagining the headaches of coordinating his chaos-filled comedic visions with Astaire's perfectionism. The tales highlight Brooks's deep understanding that strong personalities, whether glamorous, intense, or precise, create both obstacles and inspiration. In this way, Astaire exemplifies a co-star whose excellence commands respect and provides endless material for reflection and humor. Astaire's legacy in Brooks's imagination is more than just technical skill. It's the blend of awe and amusement that comes from working with someone at the pinnacle of their craft. Brooks's anecdotes underscore how the collision of methodical perfection and comedic chaos can produce stories as entertaining off-screen as on. Imagining Astaire amidst a whirlwind of pratfalls, confused extras, and flying props, Brooks delighted in the tension between art and absurdity, precision and pandemonium. Ultimately, Fred Astaire represents the capstone of Brooks's reflections on challenging co-stars. The one who demands perfection, inspires creativity, and turns even imagined scenarios into comedic legend. For Brooks, thinking about working with Astaire wasn't frustrating, it was fun, a mental exercise in balancing brilliance with absurdity, timing with chaos, and control with improvisation. As we step back and reflect on all 6 of these unforgettable actors, it's clear that Brooks's anecdotes celebrate not frustration alone, but the enduring magic of Hollywood personalities. And with that, we arrive at the conclusion. 6 larger-than-life figures, each challenging in their own way, each contributing to Brooks's unique comedy universe, and each leaving stories that delight us decades later. Now, let's see the man behind all these, Mel Brooks himself, the actor behind the chaos. Mel Brooks is often celebrated as a comedic genius, a filmmaker whose wild imagination transformed Hollywood comedy. But beyond his iconic directing and writing, Brooks was also an actor and colleague whose personality left an unforgettable imprint on anyone who worked with him. Whether he was in front of the camera or behind it, Brooks brought an energy that was equal parts infectious and unpredictable. His performances weren't about subtlety. They were about committing fully to the absurd, embracing every pratfall, every exaggerated expression, every over-the-top accent with fearless abandon. As an actor, Brooks excelled in self-parody. He didn't just direct zany characters, he became them. From the cowardly German officer in The Producers to the over-the-top Mad Hatter-esque figure in Young Frankenstein, Brooks's physical comedy and impeccable timing brought a contagious enthusiasm that elevated every scene. He wasn't afraid to look ridiculous or push boundaries. His willingness to take risks on screen earned him both respect and laughter. Colleagues often noted that his energy was magnetic, drawing everyone into the scene and encouraging actors to let go of their inhibitions. Off-camera, Brooks's reputation as a colleague was equally notable. He was known for his generosity, loyalty, and willingness to champion his cast and crew. Despite the chaos he created in his films, Brooks maintained a collaborative environment, one where actors could experiment and explore. His sharp humor and quick wit often served as an icebreaker on tense sets, keeping morale high even during challenging shoots. Yet he also demanded professionalism. Timing, commitment, and attention to detail mattered, even amid the pandemonium he orchestrated. Brooks's dual identity as a comedic powerhouse and supportive colleague helped create films that were both anarchic and carefully crafted. Actors like Gene Wilder, Marty Feldman, and Zero Mostel thrived under his direction, inspired by his energy and fearlessness. Brooks had an uncanny ability to balance absurdity with respect for talent, ensuring that every scene, no matter how ridiculous, had heart and rhythm. In short, Mel Brooks wasn't just a director of chaos, he was a performer, a collaborator, and a force of nature whose humor, generosity, and relentless creativity left an indelible mark on Hollywood. His colleagues didn't just work with him, they experienced his world, one uproarious, brilliant scene at a time. From Hackman's seriousness to Astaire's perfection, Brooks's tales show that even Hollywood big names could challenge a comedic genius. If you enjoyed this peek behind the scenes of Golden Age Hollywood, subscribe for more interesting content.